Welcome to MAR Talks, Land Defending and Revolutionary Mothering with our panelists, Symbia Barnaby, Nusmata, and Esteli Juarez. We are bringing this conversation back in honor of National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, wanting to continue with our powerful panel discussion that we began in June. And so this ongoing conversation, we are wanting to center Indigenous voices and visions for justice, healing, and liberation. So Land Defending and Revolutionary Mothering brings together some diverse Indigenous perspectives on activism, anti-racism, and the sacred responsibility of mothering. So as caregivers to children and as protectors of land, culture, and future generations. So together, today we're going to explore themes of rematriation, reparations, reciprocity, and what it means to raise children in resistance. And we're hoping that this discussion will reflect and inspire you to reflect on how land and children claim us just as we claim them, and how revolutionary mothering can be a site of deep personal and collective transformations. So grateful to have you with us. Last chat, we got through 1.5 questions. We'll see how many we get through today, but I am happy for you to be here to listen and to reflect. So I want to start again with introduction. Since we did get to meet Symbia and Esteli in our last chat, hopefully you can give like a refresher as to who you are, and then Nusmata, if you want to share as much as you want to share about who you are, it would be wonderful for us to get an opportunity to get to know you. Symbia, you just turned off your camera. Are you ready to go first? Or maybe we switch things up.
I have the camera off because of where I am, and it keeps kind of cutting in and out. So I think sometimes with the camera off, it helps with the reception. But
Okay.
okay. So my English name is Symbia Barnaby. My traditional feasted Haida name is Guu Gaa Jung. My spirit name or my ceremonial name is Warrior Woman. I'm a mom to 6 babes, ranging in age from 12 to 23. I have kiddos who are neurodivergent, who have support needs, who are labeled in the Western sense autistic, ADD and ADHD, and have mental health support needs. My background's in nursing, and I work basically with a lot of work around health equity, and also a traditional helper, and kind of like filmmaking here and there, and creative projects like that. And I was going to say out loud, what an amazing group of human beings, and that I get the pleasure of saying that these ladies for real. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Oh, Sylvia, you cut out right where I had the pleasure of saying about these ladies, and then it just like went quiet.
Aw,
And then you came back, so we don't know.
aw, I said that I get to call you guys my friends. This is my friend group. Like, I'm just gonna smile really hard, real for 2 seconds, and just appreciate the fact that this is my circle. And when you get to hear everybody's story and the work that they're doing, it's pretty honorable to be able to call these women my friends. All three of you guys, and all of the other people that are on the call today too. They're doing really great work. But to be able to say this is my friend group is pretty awesome.
Fantastic. Thanks, Symbia. And there's love for you in the chat.
Well,
Says love you, Symbia.
thanks.
Esther, are you ready to say a quick
Yeah.
hello?
Hi, everyone. My name's Esteli. My kids just came in, which is why my camera went off. And they were like, "What are you doing home already?" And I was like, "I'm on a panel about being a mom, guys." And they were like, "Oh, that's cool. Where's that at?" And I'm like, "It's right now." They were like, "Oh, great." And I was like, "Come on." My name's Esteli. I live in so-called Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the southern part of the United States, for those of you not familiar. So we're all the way at the opposite end of the medicine line. We have 19 pueblos and 3 tribes that are homed within this land. I am from here. My mom's family's from the north, my dad's family's from the south. I'm lucky enough to raise my kids, the 4 of them, on the river that their grandparents lived on. And lucky enough to get to watch the young folks in my life organize around preserving and protecting these lands like our foremothers and fathers did before us. I am trained as a lawyer. I spend most of my time doing cases with families that are high risk, so families that have been separated by state intervention, foster care, kids that are in foster care. I represent moms, dads, guardians, non-binary parents, kids, youth, and a couple of pueblos. And I get to raise hell most days and fight back against hundreds of years of genocidal policy that existed to separate families. So I get to do really great work with other parents in my community every day. And then in my free time this year, I picked up immigration law because I am bilingual and I speak Spanish and I can. So I am, because those are our families too. And so I think that's it. That's a good intro, right?
Wonderful intro.
And these are my friends, and they all came here to these lands to see me, which is so magical and special and some of the best memories that I have. So yeah, when Symbia says it's a group, this is really the friend group.
Aw, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us again today. I'm so excited for our chat. And Nusmata, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Os man Husins la Nuskamada, Nusgalstem, Snuchalkulim. Good morning, relatives. My name is Nuskamada, and I'm from the Nusgalst village of the Nukhalk Nation, which is located in now what you would call, I guess, the northwest coast of British Columbia, Canada. And I'm here in my homelands and really happy to be here today. A bit of my background. I was raised in the interior, in the northern Secwepemc Ulu homelands, um, with my mother's people, and have been coming back and forth. This is where my dad and all of his family's from on the coast. So I really feel like I have the best of both worlds. I was raised as in a harvesting family, very close to the land. So I grew up with, hunting and fishing and berry picking and traditional medicines, and it was just a normal way of life. And I've really spent the better part of my life trying to defend that and to raise awareness and education, community organizing. My, I guess my formal training began at about 5 years old when we would go fishing on the river, and I had my own little fish club, knew where to hit the salmon on the top of the head so you don't bruise the flesh, and to not watch the water so you don't fall in the river, and to walk the trails at night under the stars when we fish because it's too hot to fish during the day. And, that carried on through my life in a large extended family. I grew up in my home communities, knowing my lineage and taking part in different ceremonies. And that was just a way of life for me. And I never really questioned it until I, left home and went out into the bigger world and realized that what we have is very special. And so I've really been very intentional about keep protecting that and doing it in various forms of work that I've been called to. And I've changed jobs a lot because out of interest or need, and going back and forth between communities. But my Western education, I have an undergraduate degree in anthropology and environmental studies, where I studied about land back. We're all wearing our land back decolonial clothing today. We're all rocking that today. So, and I think this is like the same. It's not only about the land, it's about our families, it's about healthy communities, it's about clean water and access to, shelter, and a really feeling of being cared for in our communities. And so I think that's a common thread in all of the work that we do. And it's a kind of a natural gravitation that brought us together to find that commonality. So I worked in different types of organizing. My education went on to a master's degree in communication and culture from York University in Toronto, where basically I was like, wow, this is like total BS. I need to focus on my community because this academia is just a bunch of, it was a bunch of fluff to me. So I focused my studies on a big divide that happened in my community in the late 90s around land protection. And that really helped educate me and pull me deeper into my community. And so I've just been doing a lot of that. Currently, I worked about a decade in advocating for communities who are resisting mining. And in my homelands, the 2014 Mount Polley mine disaster happened in our homelands in Secwepemc Uluk. So I was kind of thrust into the spotlight with that. And it just gave me different opportunities to meet with different communities across the world, really, to share our experience about disasters, about the colonial impacts of Canadian mining companies as part of the colonial system. And then I got totally burnt out, and I was like, I really need to focus on building and creating and move back home. And so we've built a home in our ancestral village. So now we're taking on the Canadian government, British Columbia. We're engaging in land back and educating, supporting language. And we have a new initiative called New Hulk Rising. And that's on the social media platforms where we celebrate the wins and the successes and the good things that are happening in our community. So I'm a mom, I'm an auntie, And I'm a grandmother. So I have a little granddaughter who's going to be 3 in October with another one expected in December. So my life is full and I'm very thankful for everything that I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have so many questions for you. Before we get started, I just want to share too where I am coming from. So for me, I'm joining the space as a biracial Black cisgender woman, and my ancestry, I have Swedish, Irish, and English on my mom's side, so colonizer, and then African on my dad's side. And because of enslavement and broken history lines, I have a best guess as to that my ancestors were from Mali and Nigeria. And for me, I am here on the unceded lands of the Lekwungen people, so known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. And MAR, as an organization, we span many territories, and so we do work across all of Turtle Island, specifically where I am, Songhees and Esquimalt, also a Saanich, Coast Shiam, where Symbia is, Sianu, Siauk, Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Sinixt, and the Kanaxtas people, as that's where our leadership is. So very grateful to be able to be doing this work on these lands and using what we can to have conversations about this, to talk about land back and support Indigenous sovereignty and all of the wonderful things that each of you are doing, and many others as well. And I want to dive in just on one of the things that you said, Nusmata, that really, I mean, so much of what you said was really important and engaging. But the one thing that stuck to my heart was you had said it pulled you deeper into your community, like doing this work. And where we left off the conversation last time was right when we were starting to get into talk about land back. And so I would love to pick up the conversation there. And just, we talked a little bit last time about doing this work and how learning doesn't necessarily come first and then you do the work. Like you have to, by doing the work, you get the learning too. And I think that that is connected to the being pulled deeper. And so, I will give an entry point to talk about land back, but I trust you all will take it where it needs to go. But just based on what comes up in MAR and in other conversations, I want to start with that there's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of fear that settlers, immigrants, stolen people, guests have, that they are going to be now subjected to violent dispossession of their homes under the call for land back. So let's talk about that for a sec. What does reclaiming land and culture and land back look like for you in your life, in your community? And what does it actually translate to you? Um,
Sure, I can just follow up what I had been talking about. Yeah,
yeah.
I think drawing me more into my community really started with the death of my dad because we had to organize a memorial for him and a feast. And so in my community and other communities, I've witnessed that a lot of the ceremony around death rites is still quite intact and hasn't been. I mean, there's obviously colonization and assimilation that has happened, as part of that, but there are still a lot of ceremonies that we conduct that are very different to distinct from other Indigenous peoples as well. But for specifically here in Nukhalk, when we organized for his feast, I had to learn about all of the things that I was responsible for. So I had to learn about, creating a memorial panel, which we had carved. So that engaged me with different people in my family and carvers in the community. And I had to learn which crest that we were entitled to use, because you can't just use anything and it has to go back to your creation story. So we had to learn our Smaista, our stories of where we're from. And I had to talk to the matriarchs in the community about process, and I had to engage with my community about putting it in our ancestral village. And it had to do with my dad's name, which is Nuskalst, which is the name of our village. So it was like all of these different pieces that came together that helped educate me about what my responsibilities are. And that's a really big piece of the work that we're doing, is upholding our responsibilities and our laws, and to do the work in a way that we're satisfying our laws and proper protocol and process for our community. And we're like, and if that also happens to, satisfy colonizer requirements, then whatever, like, okay. It's just a coincidence. And we're not super focused on that. And so bringing us deeper into the community. So when we put up that memorial panel in our ancestral village, and it was the first time that something like that had been returned to the land in one of our villages since the time, like since the 1860s. 1862 is when June 4th, 1862 was when smallpox was introduced deliberately into our village here in Nucalcalimp, into our villages. And so since that time, over 150 years, that something like that had been put up. And after we put that stween up, that memorial marker in our village, other markers went up in other villages and other people. It kind of the tension so that it gave other people in our nation permission to do that. So that was one piece. But then many years later, we decided that intention all along that we wanted to build a home there. But after it was during the pandemic when we had come home and we couldn't stay with anybody because everything was on lockdown, that we're like, we really need to build a home so that we have a place for ourselves, and we need to do it in our village. And so we built it right behind where we put that marker, which is also in very close proximity. So it's right within our ancestral village. There's a very close proximity to graves that are there, to fishing access that is there. So it's a very important place. And our village was one of the biggest villages and one of the oldest villages of our nation. So we said, it's really up to us to take responsibility for protecting this place, because if we don't, it's just going to be all sold off and people are going to be, putting whatever all over our graves. And it's already happening. There are parcels of land that have been sold off with graves in our village. So we're there raising awareness. We've built a home for ourselves. We've done it in a very sustainable way. We've engaged our community. We've had to learn about our laws. We've had different community events. We've been very transparent. We've been sharing our process so that people know the proper way to do this according to our laws. We've been pushing back on the provincial government, who gave us a trespass notice on our home in our village, citing archaeology that proves that it's our village. It's just so stupid. And we're like, are you serious? And so now they don't really know what to do with us, because they went ahead and did that. And then we're kind of backtracking like, so they're trying to push it over to conversations, but they still haven't made it a priority to come here. And they were actually supposed to be here last week and canceled at the last minute. So, we're just like living our lives, and we're like, one, we're not going anywhere. We have every right to be here. Even your documentation shows that. And we're sharing that story with other people. And, within our community, it's really the goal, really show that we have not only every right, but we have every responsibility to be there. We need to relight the fire in our village to protect it. And that light will have other people light the fires in their villages until we get our country back, right? And it really bugs me when people call me an activist. I'm like, I'm not an activist. I'm Nucalcalimp. Like, I'm Nucalcalimp. And when I see the stories coming out of Palestine, it's like they're freedom fighters. They're fighting for the liberation of their people under these oppressive systems. I'm like, that's exactly what it is. So when people call me an activist, I just kind of roll my eyes and just like, okay, that's shortcuts what you see me doing. But really what I'm doing is I'm trying to live up to my responsibilities as a Nucalcan woman, as an Indigenous woman, and to protect my families and community, and to clear a path forward for our children. And whatever work that I can do in this life will help clear a path for them that they don't have to do, and just normalize what land back is. And it's really about our own sovereignty, our own ability to make decisions on our own lives, and to restore the humanity of our people in the face of colonialism. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. If I can do a small follow-up question to that, to what you shared, and then we'll jump to everybody else. When you first started sharing, you were talking about how you, through the process of upholding your responsibilities to honor your dad after his passing, you had to learn all of these things. And I'm curious, it struck me, it's for some, there might be shame there in not having learned that before, but the way that you speak about it, it's like it's the opportunity, it's the process. And so I'm curious if you have, thoughts or words around that about the process of learning these things. Again, in that like we learn.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think there should be any shame held by people who've never had the opportunity to learn, who haven't had the teachers. And when an opportunity comes up, to go in with that humility, that humbleness of like, I'm here to learn, I'm here to do the work, I'm here to show up and make mistakes and have fun while I'm doing it, right? And to also the responsibility of sharing that knowledge or that skill or whatever knowledge you've had and share it with somebody else. And that's our traditional, right? Like, so I nobody can know everything. And if you haven't had the opportunity, there's no shame. And also, there's like systemic violence against us to not know that. So it's like whatever you can learn and reclaim for yourself is a win for everybody. And it's really important that you share that as well. So don't ever be ashamed of being, motivated and curious and willing to do the work, because those are the things that are really being discouraged within this colonial system. So I think if you're willing to learn something new, that says a lot about you and your strength of spirit. And we welcome that. In I don't like to say the struggle. It is a struggle. It is, against violence, but it's a movement of reclamation and rematriation and reclamation of self. So I like to frame it in that way, because otherwise it can get very, very heavy and very lonely and discouraging. And it's like, okay, don't succumb to that. Don't listen to the voice. Be like, okay, I'm gonna a little bit every day really adds up for real.
So I have a couple of things to say. I want to start with the fun stuff, which is kind of in response to some of the things that Ruskamata just said. And I was talking to Symbia earlier this morning, and yesterday I got to sit with my dad and his sister and his brother and my uncle, my aunt's husband. They were just talking story about like when they were young, right? Back in the day, and like in the 60s and 70s and what they were doing, and telling all these really dope stories. And when my aunt left, it was my uncle, her husband, and my dad and his brother. And my uncle, who is so my dad and 8 brothers and sisters, and his mom and his aunt and his uncle, they all lived in a one-room home with dirt floors and no running water and electricity. Their only ancestral land or language that they had at that time was Spanish. So that was the only language that they spoke until they were forced to go to school. And they were forced to do that. The 3 younger siblings, my dad and his brother and his sister, who I was with yesterday, in a day school where they were forced to speak English, where they got English names, where their hair was cut, and where my aunt told me a story of that was the first time she had ever been physically punished in her life. The first day she went to school and she asked to use the bathroom in Spanish. It's like a very hot issue right now in the United States, because our Supreme Court just pushed away, I guess, set aside an injunction to stop immigration agents from being able to use people who speak Spanish as a reason to stop, detain, search, and question. And a really strong effort that we're seeing right now down here to really English only the country, which is wild in a lot of ways, because first contact didn't come with English settlers. First contact came with Spanish settlers. I live and come from the land of first contact because my settler ancestors came here first. And so we've been speaking Spanish on so-called American land since the 1500s, long before a British ship ever hit the shores over on Plymouth Rock. So it's wild to me, this layers of settler colonialism and this idea that the longer you settle, you have a greater claim to the land, which I stand by and say, no, we don't. And if that's your train of thought, then these people have a stronger claim to the land because we've been settled here longer, but that's besides the point. See, the medicine didn't do all it was supposed to do. So we're sitting there. My uncle asked my dad, what do you call someone like Teresa, right? Like my aunt. She's like an activist and she has all, she's all these things. She does all of this analysis in her brain, but she couldn't read past the 3rd grade reading level. And my dad told the story about how the first book my aunt ever read cover to cover when she was 25 years old, when she was already a mom, she already had kids, already had been forcefully sterilized by this government, was the Communist Manifesto. And that she had a boyfriend. She had some cute radical boyfriend who taught her how to read using the Communist Manifesto. And I was like, it was the boyfriend, it wasn't Marx, but it got where it needed to go. And he asked, how did you guys end up like this? You all did these things. How did you end up like this? And my dad said, you're doing too much. We're like this because we were loved. And hearing the stories you told, right, about the land and being on the land at 5 years old and learning how to be with the land and exist alongside of it, right? Not off of it, but with it. That's love. We learn how to defend the land. We learned how to defend families. We learned how to defend each other because we know what love looks like and we know what love doesn't look like. And we know that that shit is not love. And some of us were raised in environments where love was for everything, right? It wasn't just for each other. It was for all the things around us. And it was for all the people around us. My grandmother always used to say, if the baby is here, then the baby is ours. I don't care where it came from. If it's here in front of us, then it belongs to us and we care for it that way. All of the children belong to us. They're all our babies. And that's love. And we fight for the land because we love the land, and we fight for our kids because we love them. And even like the anger and the frustration, my sister used to say, you're just mad because you love so much. Like you're angry like this inside about what's happening in the injustice of the world because love too. And when I think about what does land back mean, I think about returning the land to the people that love it, right? To the people that have been stewarding it since time immemorial, to the folks who know how to engage and commune with the land in ways and manners that are long before, right? Any folks ever came here from somewhere else and tried to tell us what it's supposed to be like. How can we replicate what you have over here? We don't need to replicate that because we have some stuff here. We've had flood irrigation ditch farming here in so-called New Mexico since like 900. Like before anyone ever came here, these folks had figured out how to irrigate, flood farm, and how to create stores for folks up to 300,000 people for 70 years, Isleta Pueblo had. They knew that they had experienced some shit where things were gone, where they had a lack, and they knew how to prepare for that in the future, right? They knew how far corn pollen would spread so that they could not cross-contaminate corn, so that they could yield one color batches of corn for ceremonial purposes, right? There were things here, there were ways that the folks here loved the land that they knew that it would last them. And it would last for their children, and it would last for their children's children's children. And just in case something happened that it wouldn't, they knew how to store food for up to 7 years for almost 300,000 people in the metropolis that was Tiwa Lands here, because this was a huge interchange, right? Here where I live, people have been coming all the way from the Pacific Northwest, from coastal Salish territories, all the way from the plains areas, Lakota, Dakota people here, all the way from the south, right? I joke, we have Parrot Clan here in New Mexico. There are Pueblos, Parrot Clan. I'm like, there's no parrots here. There are no parrots here. Those parrots came from someone else brought those parrots, right? And for so long, they brought those parrots that became so intricate to the societal structures that we had clans and ceremonies around that, right? We were here exchanging for so long and we knew how to sustain. And so when I talk about land back, and it's probably the pragmatic lawyer in my brain, I say to folks, when you die, who is your home deeded to? Does it go back to the original people who have been stewarding this land, or does it perpetuate generational wealth in the interest of colonial settlers? Because to me, land back is very much, it is pragmatic. It is, when I get people have invested in their home and in this place, and there's all of these things that we have to, and I don't know, because I don't own a home, but, which is my own shit. But, right, I understand that about people who own land in that way under this society. But I think if we are serious about living, if we are serious about sustaining a planet that continues to feed human beings, and that we survive, and that our children's children's children's, our unseen, who will never even speak our names because we will be so far gone, will still be here living off this river, then we have to give it all back, bro. We have to give it all back because we don't know what we're doing. And I look out yesterday, I was meeting with a young woman to talk about, she wants to interpret. They took away all of our interpreter services, the federal government did. So we have to now provide all of our own interpretation. And we were having a discussion. She was telling me she was organizing with this group and all this stuff and talking about her experience. She's probably in her 20s. And I was talking to her about, this group was led by people from outside this community. Like whatever you thought they were doing, they weren't. And she was like, well, there's no one in this community. And I was like, there is. There are lots in this community, and people who come from other places who are not in touch and are not on the ground are going to tell you there's nothing like this where you're at. No, it's just because it doesn't look like what it looks like from your national organization that's sending your funding doesn't mean that someone's mom down the street hasn't been doing this shit for 35 years off of her front porch. We've been facing a drug crisis. We have been facing unhoused relatives, and in these unceded territories my entire life. We have figured out ways to organize, right? It's not activism, it's life, right? It's love. And I was talking to her about that, and I said, and I was telling her this, the land has to go back because we grow tulips and daffodils and elm trees and shit that doesn't belong here, that sucks all the water out of the watershed, that doesn't give anything back, that doesn't yield what it's supposed to yield because this isn't its climate. Like, we do all kinds of stuff to the land that doesn't make any damn sense, that no one stops us from doing because we think that we use the land because we're not a part of it. And if we want to live, we have to give it all back. We have to, if you own it, you've got to deed it back. And those of us who have those privileges still have got to use them. And being able to own land in this society is a great privilege. And like I said, as we see with our unhoused relatives here and the numbers that it's just skyrocketing, that the privilege of being housed is huge. And so, yeah, pragmatically, we give it all back. If you own a thing, if you have the rights to it, then you sign it back to those folks who were the original stewards of that land, and you let them figure out how they're going to use it. It cannot be theory. Now, will it be violent revolution? I don't think so, because really the majority of revolutions, the violence doesn't really, it's not the way that we perceive it, right? We think of war the way that we see empires destroy countries, like in Palestine, right? We watch this kind of thing. but for folks that live in countries that have had recent revolutions, and I think of Latin America, I think of all the countries in Latin America that have been in an overturn of turmoil of independence for the last 150 years, right? A lot of times folks are living in their house, right? They're at their home, they're doing their job, and revolution is happening and everyone's playing their part, but it doesn't necessarily happen in a violent, displaced way like we see empires destroy communities and land. But I also think you call yourself an ally, put your money where your mouth is, literally. Put that deed in the hands of folks that will be able to figure out what to do with that land, to preserve it and to love it and to make sure that everybody's got a little something, enough to sustain us for the next 7 generations.
Thank you.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. There's a couple things that I want to say. I'm just going to keep my camera off, and if it cuts out, wait a second, you guys can carry on. I forgot to say earlier that I live on Coast Tsimshian territory, specifically the 9 tribes of Lakwalams and Metlakatla, which is referred to as Northwest Coast currently of BC. But I'm currently on the Haida Nation traditional territory. I'm out in the bush. I'm here. They just did a totem pole raising yesterday, and they're going to do a rites of passage ceremony in about a couple hours. So right when I'm done this, we're going to another potlatch. And if you can hear my voice sounds a little off, it's because I was at the potlatch until 3 o'clock in the morning. Because we were celebrating them putting up this pole and celebrating all the children. They brought in and got some children dance groups to come in and present. And I was like crying. These kids were they're like from 2 to about 13 or 14 in this group. They brought a bunch of us together of youth, and it was amazing. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that because land back's so important, and we all come from like different backgrounds. And we were giggling earlier, like we're all legacies. We're all children of people that were doing really revolutionary work already too, like before we came on the scene, and then now we're like, okay, we've been raised up in that mentality, in that way of life. And like what Nuskamata was saying, this is our roles and responsibilities. It isn't activism. It's what we're called on, cultural responsibilities and our roles. And to go with what Esley was saying, we Indigenous people have a mad love affair with the land. Mad love affair. I remember hearing that, and I'm like, I'm putting that in my pocket and using that all the time. Yeah, it's important that this is where I am today, to share, because about, was a week ago or so, they had Crown actually, I don't know all the processes to do with land and title, like why that it was landmark last week, but they recognized it, federal government and provincial government, that Haida Gwaii belongs to the Haida people. And I talked a little bit about it last time that we were here. But I was reading all these articles from Don Rustad after, and talking about how he was like, oh, we're going to have to contest this, this is going to bring instability to our province, and, like all this financial stuff, is going to have, like, this is just fear mongering, right? 100% fear mongering. And it's on their official website, on the Conservative website, about how they feel about, Haida people owning or being responsible for their own lands. And you know what? I'm going to try not to cry. I feel like I'm going to cry the whole entire time, just saying. But we're sitting at our cousin's house the other day when we first got here, and we're talking away about exactly this, because it had just happened right before we got here. And he said, you know why he's like that? And why some of the people on Haida Gwaii that are, they call them Yatsade, which means non-Haida people. You know why the Yatsade are like that? Because they're worried that how we're going to treat them, that we're going to kick them off, and then we're going to treat them poorly. And he said, you know why? Because those Yatsade, that's how they would treat us, and how they've consistently treated us. So they're worried that we're going to flip it and treat them in the same way. Yet we know better. We know that's not how we conduct ourselves, and we understand that's not how we're going to move forward. And it's even quoted from the president of the Council of Haida Nation. He's like, I'm not sure what they think we're going to do, like as homes, go up for sale, Haida Gwaii, or Council of Haida Nation has the option of buying it and buying the land back along with it, and then doing what they would like to do with it, right? And then that capacity building in our communities and homes, and like so many things, like this is a landmark case, which I keep saying all the time. It's precedent setting because it is precedent setting, and I think about the Giksen, I think about the Haida, and I think about the Niska, about the court cases that they've won, and what that's meant for land back in our area, right? And how others, once there's court cases, people can go back and draw on them and say this, according to this case, or according this case, or this case, because it's already been tried and proven at the different levels to say that they had a case for this, right? So I think being a child of somebody who was a part of the Council of Haida Nation who pushed so hard and worked so hard, I said the story a lot too. He's 35 years in it. That's how long it's taken for them to get land and title, and for somebody to turn around and be like, oh, we're going to go and contest it like immediately, I think is like, dude, and they keep pressing on this idea of economic what's the word that they say? My brain's tired to remember the actual term, but it's like economic reconciliation or something like that. But where they're talking more about like participation of Indigenous people within the projects so that some will financially benefit, not hello, it's our own land that we should have the say over what happens. And if we want to do business with other people, they may benefit. It's immediately like, oh, they're trying to put it back to your nation will prosper, you'll have jobs, you'll have this, that, the other thing, and they don't account for all of the things that come alongside of it. And I think we even talked about this last time too, like look at mental health of communities, projects and stuff like that go through, right? Or logging. This is one of the things that they've had on Haida Gwaii, logging like you wouldn't believe, and that they've actually, have a case that it's called Lyle Island. If anybody's curious to look it up, they've got good videos about it. But protection to say, like, we should have a right to say, no. Like, I keep thinking about that. Do we need to teach consent culture a little bit stronger? Because like, doesn't no mean no? Like, isn't that one of the first things that we start to learn about consent? No means no. Like, if we're no to you, it means no. Free, prior, informed, all these bills trying to go through recently, that fast track, all these projects. And like, yeah, my biggest thing to kind of add to it around that land back is, stop trying to fight us when we get it. Stop trying to get in the way of us being able to claim it. Stand alongside, uplift the people like Nuskamata, like Esteli, like my dad, like people that are doing this work. Stand alongside. Make sure that you're, sharing their story. Because I was thinking about that. I was like, land back's not only about doing your own work in your own territory, but it's also witnessing the work that people are doing in other territories. Nuskamata invited me to come and witness the work that she's doing there, her and her family. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is sacred work too. Like bearing witness to the work so that somebody can come back and she can call back to me and say, you witnessed that we did this work, right? Yes. Did we do this in a good way? Yes. Who was present? I remember so and so and so and so. This was, this is what's said at the time. We're sacred witnesses to the work that they're doing. That's just a part of this land back movement too, is being witnesses. Because I think sometimes today, non-Indigenous people think that it has to be, oh, we have to do these big, huge gestures in order to be good allies or to be doing something effectively. And it's like, no, sit and watch, observe, listen, bring amplification to your spaces about the work that's being done. Now that you've heard Nuskamata's story, tell that to the you've been in. Who are you connected to? Those who work for the provincial government. How many of you that we're connected to, bring that back. I know this woman. I know, she told a story, and like that's just as much a part of the land back work as actually being on the land, right? And I'll say this last thing, then we can move on, is it's not just about occupying the land, right? We do ceremony on that land. Ceremony is our way of connecting with our own spirit, with great spirit, with creator, with Salana. That's our word for the chief in this,
Oh no, you cut out.
where's our Spirit, I was just saying, I'll repeat it, but like, where is our spirituality if we don't have the land? I don't know that answer, right? If we don't have that space to put our feet on the ground, if we don't have that space to go hug trees, if we don't have that space to go in the river or in the ocean, or to use plant-based traditional medicines, our ancestors that get to come forward and help us as medicines. What the heck?
And to,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly what Ashley said. Give thanks for the land for holding us. How I was thinking about that. I was like, if I don't have a space carved out for me to be able to go out in the bush, like, I don't know if I told this story the last time, but there's this guy I met at a conference, and it was about it was a national Indigenous physical activity and wellness conference, and this guy was talking. He's actually Giksen and Wet'suwet'en or something like that, but he was talking about going mountain climbing. That was his thing, and that was his way of connecting to wellness. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. It's on the land. You have free access. Like, it doesn't cost you anything. It's on your own traditional territory. Oh my God, I love this whole idea. And then he talked about going back to different parts and actually having like development people and police officers policing different parts of it. I mean, he just, innocently had gone into the bush to go by the river where he had gone when he was a kid. And then there was a police officer in there and it was like, hey, what are you doing in here? And he was like, whoa, like accessing their own.
Okay. When Symbia comes back, oh, yep, she'll come back. When she comes back, well, she can finish off her thought. So much of what each of you have shared I have so many thoughts going, and just even the small reminders about the language we use. I think of like, on the land, or how the land is serving me versus like, or sorry, not using that language, but like with the land and being in relation with the land as opposed to having power over, and the that instead it's not activism, but that the it's love in action and responsibility, and as a community member and being in connection to, and just for me thinking about like on that systems level, we talk a lot in MAR about doing this work and starting this work at home, and that as parents, our relationship with our children, it's their first introduction to those power hierarchies and power wielding and those dominance behaviors and that dominion over. And so we talk about how we're all having to heal from these systems of colonialism and white supremacy and patriarchy and capitalism, and how that those systems have interrupted that connection. And that goes for connection with the land too. And just thinking about that, thinking about how, as children, almost like that process of disconnection, of being that systematic disconnection from the land, from plants, from animals, from people, from ourselves. Um, and so I would love to talk about that just from your perspective of like, where do you see that showing up for you in your parenting or in your communities or elsewhere? And then how do we heal from that in your perspective? And as parents, like what can we do to help our children, like you were saying earlier, Nisana, essentially stand on our shoulders? We're doing work, and we hope that our children don't have to repeat our same work, but that they can take it further. And so how do we set them up for this type of healing and reconnecting?
Just quickly respond by saying, like, it's our responsibility to demonstrate that with them, to teach them by having that relationship ourselves. And even really basic things like food, knowing where food comes from. I know lots of people don't really think about it. They think, oh, it just comes from the grocery store, and they don't have a connection with their own food. So I think that's something that people can do. Honestly, I've seen people have, even just small plants growing, if they're in urban settings, small plants growing in their own kitchens. You can see some plants behind me. These are just aloe. I mean, I've got like some medicine plants and whatever, but people growing your own food, or really focusing on local food sources like farmers markets and that type of thing. Like, and really having the kids live it. And so you have an opportunity to learn for yourself. I think putting away your own food is also something you can do. We put away our own food, like fruits and vegetables and meat and fish and that type of thing for shelf stable food security. And I think it just also, people talk about the land, we're not part of it. And it's really baffling to me. You live on Earth, you depend on food grown on this planet, you depend on clean water from this planet, you depend on clean air from this planet. How can you think of yourself as separate? And in our teachings, we talk about being a good relative. And so you are in relationship with everything else on this earth. And so to think of yourself as part of that is a really important shift in perspective. And to know that in everything that you come into contact with, you are in relationship or you're not in relationship with it. So to improve that, it can be really simple. People need to go outside more. People need to think about how they are connected into these systems and how they can support healthier systems. So it's a matter of small changes that can add to bigger changes. And a lot of the work that I do too is like, we need to show what that love story is with the land. What is that amazing, beautiful story? How do people get a piece of that? How do people get a feeling of that connection? And it's really simple things that don't cost any money. I remember laying on the ground as a child with my mom and just looking at the clouds and being fully immersed in this experience where you're actually touching the ground and just being very present in where you are. And yeah, I think there's a lot of things that people can do and start small.
It makes me think just generally how we, under these systems, I'll speak for myself, just the conditioning of how we treat relationship in general, of like, I'll have a relationship with you if I can, if you serve a purpose for me, kind of thing, if I can get something out of it, right? As opposed to that sense of responsibility and connection. And I think there is that viewing, like you say, like it makes no sense of like we're on this planet and we're part of everything, but that we have been conditioned in a lot of ways to have more of an exploitative relationship with the land and with other people, of like, will you do something for me? No, so then I won't necessarily get to know you, which is really sad, and how much we miss out on community and being in our own sense of humanity. And sorry, that was like just a little random thought that wasn't really going anywhere, but I appreciate that.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, really. I think people need to realize that, like, there's a reciprocity that is required in relationship.
Hmm.
And in our language, we call it nuyayant, and it's like wearing a cloak of generosity. And it's like, when, if I do something for you out of my abundance that I can share, it's not that you owe me, but I'm calling you into relationship. I'm calling you into this reciprocity, which is a relationship. And you can choose to not be part of that if you want, but you know, there's a responsibility when you're interacting in the world. And those are part of our teachings that we have. And I remember thinking the other day, I was like, not everybody's received teachings. A lot of people have only ever received colonial conditioning. And so that's something that I'm really taking into account in my community as well. That there are a lot of people who've never received any teachings. And so we have to be aware of that and to share that when we can.
Thank you.
Can I share a little idea too here? It was popping into my head about some of the things that we're doing about that healing, like the question you had asked. It's about building community, and we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but building that community around your kids. Who are their aunties? Both my kid or all my kids call both Esley and Nuskma their auntie. Their auntie from New Hawk territory, auntie from the US, like they this is it. And they even call Carrie auntie too, right? Auntie Carrie. And this is part of it, is building that community around them. That's one of the biggest ways that we're healing, because then we expand their network. We're expanding people that they're accountable to, people that they're going to be able to rely on to do some of those teachings, like Nuskamata just said. Some people were not gifted these teachings because they were not raised up in it, or their parents were coping through trauma and didn't have some of those things taught to them. So building that community around them, inviting people in, having those people being familiar and safe faces for your babes is super important, because they'll know who are safe people to go and reach out to in times of, I remember a couple different people that my mom brought into our space when we were kids. She grew up with a lot of trauma. Like, I love my mom, obviously. That goes without saying. But sometimes I described it in the past like being raised by a tornado. Like I say that lovingly, right? My mom is an incredible human being, especially given all the things that she's navigated through trauma and has survived, and now is starting to do the work to heal, right? And but she brought people in to teach us about, womanhood, about your cycle, about, cleanliness, and about, how do pads work, because my mom was raised by her father, then put into foster care. So when did she have those teachings given to her about how to have that cleanliness and how to have pads and how to about cycles and all those? She didn't have those things taught to her, right? And she had shame put upon her about those things and those teachings. So, you know, even though I wanted our mama to do that teachings, and that's who we look to have those teachings. She wasn't the one that had those teachings, but she knew the people that did have those teachings and brought us to them, or brought them to us, right? So, I think about Nuskamana and her grandbaby. Oh, her little grandbaby, so dang cute. Just want to pinch her cheeks all the time. But thinking about all the things that she's doing too for that babe, speaking that she's getting to teach her babes, like their language, which is so important. And even if you don't know a lot of words, the words you do know, using them consistently, and that's that building that community, building that support. And those, I feel like all of those things, and sharing meals with people and sharing soup with people. And that's an inside joke with all of us about soup. And I've been eating soup the whole time I've been in Haida too, so I'm so excited about it. But feeding people, sitting with people and having your kids sit with them too. I remember kind of giggling about it when the kids were little. I was like, I don't think my children know anything other than communalism. They are always eating with other people, and I'm like, do they know we could eat at our own home, or it just could be our family? Because we used to eat with everybody all the time. We would be at programs, we'd be visiting, we'd be table with other people. So I think all of those things are things that are healing and reclaiming, and those things are complementary medicine to land back. These are the things that uphold us being able to be out on the land, and the connection to each other, and the connection to the next generation, and the generation before us, right, is sitting together, eating together, feeding each other on the land. Yeah.
One of the things I think when Carrie was talking about separation, right? The separation of us from the land, the separation of us from plant and animal relative, separation from each other, separation from self, right? Last night when I was with that young person, we were talking, they wanted to talk about theory and Marx and communism and all this stuff. And I was like, look, I'm going to tell you, I read theory really young. I came from a family where that was a thing that we did. That by the time that my elders were what folks would call politicized, right? Like in their life, they was like this, right? They just did these things. It was the way they were raised. It was community. It was what it was. But when there was a theory put to what they had experienced in their life, they had turned their military service into a GI Bill, and turned that GI Bill into an undergraduate degree, and had turned that into an uncle of mine who was a graduate recruiter at the University of Washington, who, when they sent him to recruit, he recruited all of his brothers. He said, all of you come up here, come get a graduate degree, come get a law degree, come to Seattle. And then they did what they did up there. But it wasn't until they were into that place that they began to really experience theory, right? And Marxism was really big for them. And a lot of my elders, when I was growing up, would call themselves Marxists, right? Because of the framework that they had experienced. So I read Marx really young. And when I was talking to this young person about that, I was like, I read the manifesto by the time I was 16. I read Capital before I was 20. And then I started to talk about Capital. And I forgot, right, in my old age now, how impactful reading Das Kapital was for me in terms of an understanding of how a capitalist structure separates us. And it separates us from the land, and it separates us from ourselves, and it separates us from our labor, and it turns us into a product making thing, right? It mechanizes the human. And there's something in the manifesto where Marx says that capitalism turns even the lawyer and the doctor into its paid wage labor, right? That even those of us who have a calling to heal, right, to defend, to advocate in this system become nothing more but a mechanized version of that call to heal or that call to advocate because of this structure. But in that conversation, I talked a lot about that, right? About how capital showed me what that separation looked like in this society, and that Marx in that way gave me a set of tools to undo right, what I had been shown and to prepare me, right, when I had children to not replicate those things, to find a way to always stay connected to the labor that I was producing, that I was engaged in, so that my children could see someone who worked with themselves alongside of the community that they were a part of, so that there was never a separation. And it was, right, it shows in my life, because I often say to folks that I work with, when was the last time that some young person who came to the foster care system sat at your table and you fed them and it wasn't at a conference? When was the last time that someone who came through the system that we work in every day called you up on the phone and asked you for a reference or asked you for advice or asked you for guidance, right? When was the last time you were in your community and you saw families that you knew, right? Are you really in this work, or are you doing a job? And for me, the work that I do is reflected in the community that I have. It's reflected in the young folks that I'm surrounded with. It's reflected in the people that my kids call brother and sister and cousin and auntie. And there are ways, right, to reject what capitalism would do to us if we let it. But it does require teachings. It does require understanding. And even for those of us who don't grow up in with access to traditional ways of being, right? There are tools, right? There are some folks. And I also told this young person, I was like, not for the future. Whatever Marx wrote down, that's not for the future. What's for the future is return the land and give it to the people that know how to do what they need to do with it so that we can survive. That's what the future looks like. But in order to dismantle the system, right? In order to see our way out of it, Marx is a very helpful tool, especially when it comes to that part about how have we been separated, so separated from ourselves, from our land, from our labor, from each other. And what Nuskamata said was right. The only way that we teach it is by doing it. The only parenting advice I ever give people is that 9 out of 10 times the children do what you do and not what you say. So if you want them to know how to organize around things that matter to them, if you want them to be able to defend the things that they love, right, then you give them the foundation by showing them. This is what it looks like. This is what diligence looks like. This is what getting up early mornings to show up for ceremony looks like. This is what late nights on conversations on the phone or out in community looks like. This is what picking up and going places when you're too tired and you don't want to go nowhere, but community looks like sometimes picking up and going places that you're too tired to want to go and do, because that's how we continue to build with each other. It's not just, right? And I'm not saying we don't rest, but I am saying, right, sometimes you're tired, you don't want to go do the thing, but you know what? You love those people and you love what they do. And so you get up and you put your hoodie on and you put your slides on and you drag yourself out the house one more time to be a part of community, right? To be responsible to each other. Because that's what that looks like. Because someday some folks you're going to need some folks and you're going to ask them to drag themselves out of the house in their hoodies and, and their slides to come stand next to you on some front line, right? And that's that call to relationship. That's that invitation, right? That's how we reestablish connection. And what Symbia was saying, right? About like when people invite you places to come see their thing, you go do that. When I teach other lawyers about building tribal partnerships, that's the way. Will you come teach about building tribal partnerships, Astily? Yes, I'll come teach about building tribal partnerships. And we have feast days here. So all the pueblos here in New Mexico have a Catholic saint that's associated with them, that's through our colonial process. And those pueblos have traditional dances, traditional food, traditional ceremonies alongside the Catholic ones for whatever saint represents their pueblo. And most feast days in New Mexico for major saints, for a lot of them are open to the public, anybody can go. But if you grew up here and you grew up with folks, you know that you shouldn't show up on anybody's land without a direct invitation every single time, because past consent and previous consent is not current consent. So every year you should get an invite to anybody's land if you want to show up at a feast. But what I tell folks when I train them is that you should never ask if you can go. If you represent a young client and they have some sort of a ceremony with their people, you should never ask if you can go. If an invitation is appropriate, you'll receive one. And if you receive an invitation, then that should become the priority. And if you have court, if you have meetings, if you have something else, you should tell those folks they can sit down and they can wait another 3 weeks because you got invited to go somewhere that most folks don't get invited to go. And you should take that opportunity to show up on those people's land, to honor them, to be respectful, and to take in whatever it was that was valuable to them that they wanted to share with you. And that's how we build community. And that's how we're called into community, right? And that's how we're called in to create relationship. And folks remember, right? People will remember. If you were invited somewhere and you didn't show up, they'll remember. And if you were invited and you did show up, they'll remember. Even, this year I made feast days. I was the first one on the little van up to the feast in San Felipe because my niece was dancing and I was there before the church bells rang to get out because I had a 10 o'clock hearing. I had to be back down off the land, right? There's no service in these communities. And I was up in Acoma on feast day not until the last bells rang because I was working on some other pueblo until 5 o'clock. But I went, right? I went. And when I walked through the door, my best friend blinked twice hard like this. And she was like, "You're here." And I was like, "I know I'm late." She was like, "All that's left is beans and chili." And I was like, That's a meal. That's stew. Sit me down and a piece of bread. We're good to go." But make the effort because when people invite you to their lands, that's special. That's sacred, right? Lots of us ended up here with no invitation. And we've been messing stuff up ever since we got here. And so the invite is crucial and it's critical and it creates a space for ongoing relationship and reciprocity, right? And the opportunity to sit in a community and to be led by the people from that community, to sit and to listen. Symbia was saying that earlier yesterday when I was talking to that young person. They're not from here and they want to do all this organizing work and they're real excited. And I was like, sometimes you just sit and you listen and you let the folks that are from here, you let them lead. And if you're serious about the work you want to do here, then that's what you'll do. You'll sit down and you'll listen. And I talked to her about Che Guevara because young folks love Che. That's a whole complicated issue that I have, but it is what it is. And I said, Che went all kinds of places and fought in all kinds of other folks' wars and took up guns and fought for all kinds of people's liberations. But you know what? He went where he was invited. He showed up in the capacity they needed him to show. Did you need him to change his whole appearance so much so that his children didn't recognize him when he sat at the table so that he could make it through your immigration process as the doctor? Then he did that. Did he need to be out on the land for 6 months at a time and not shave and pick up a rifle? Then he did that. Whatever it was they needed from him, he showed up in those ways. And so even those of us who are not, right, just because I have a complex relationship with the land that I live on and how my people got here, right? Those of us who are not all from the land or from this place, right? We can still show up in allyship, but it means being led. It means sitting down and listening, right? It means finding the opportunity for connections that we don't necessarily inherently have to this place. And that's how, in the end, you get invited to stay when we're kicking everybody off the land.
I love it.
Be a good relative. That's the bottom line. Be
Yeah.
a good relative.
I love how we have like 5 shirts that we have already said sayings to throughout this entire time already. We need our own clothing line with all of these.
Yeah.
I was thinking about when you're saying it's not just about land back, and I was thinking about the t-shirt that Esley, one of the ones that we talked about, we were like, we need this on a shirt, and it was like land back, children back, language back, like it had all the water back. And I was like, yeah, I remember reading it and just crying and being like, we need to be wearing this every day, because yeah, it's not just, they're all interconnected. You can't take one away from the other. That was the other thing that I was thinking about when everyone was talking, was like, you can't separate this stuff. And I think sometimes like to silo it or separate it, and they don't understand that it's all interconnected. Every single thing. You can't do one thing without ripple effects to another thing, right? Like being out on the land, and then it affects our spirituality, which affects our mental health, which affects our way how we show up in community, like all of those things are all interconnected, all of them. And people like to have that mentality that it's all separate and that we can affect one thing and exploit one thing and capitalize off of one thing and that it's not going to have a ripple effect. Like that's the biggest lie of capitalism. And like when we're talking about land back, without really sitting in that it's interconnected, like what are you doing? I just, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being bratty because I'm sitting in front of like the most beautiful. I wish you guys can see where I was right now, but sitting out here, this is what I wish for everybody, sitting and having that connection. And like, we talk about disconnection. That's the root of so much of the stuff that we're talking about when we're talking about impact and effect and stuff, Yeah. Where are you connected? Carrie, Esley, where are you connected? Miss Kamada, where are you connected? All the others that are on the call right now, where are you connected, right? And if somebody's affecting any one piece of those things, what happens? How thrown off do you feel? And you're like,
And kind of
it's all
the
connected.
inverse of that also is like a lot of times when we're doing work, I know for myself, I'm like, is this even doing anything? Am I talking into the void? Is this impacting anybody? Like, I really want to quit. I am so sick of this. I'm tired. I'm disillusioned. I'm depressed. I'm like, just want to run away. And that's part of the work too, right? Like the real work. I love that's what you said about like, is it a job or is it the work?
Yeah.
Like showing up in that and just knowing that the work that we collectively do, it does make an impact. We just don't always know where, and we just have to trust that follow those teachings, that it is making a difference. And you never know where it's going. You think about all the people who have impacted you. It could have been a conversation or a word or a song or whatever, all of those things, that connectedness, right? That we have to believe that the work that we're doing is making positive impact.
Thank you all so much. Like my brain is pinging. I have so many other things that I like we could talk for so much longer. But one of the things that we have been saying in Mar, really, at bottom line, is relationship is the remedy. When we as individuals can do what we need to do with our own healing to be able to then be in relationship with ourselves, with others, with the land, we are then, the systems will fall apart, right? So long as we are out of relationship, so long as we are not practicing reciprocity, we are inadvertently upholding those systems. And what came to me with what you were sharing, Estely, is that we really need to get over being inconvenienced, right? Like the minor inconvenience is keeping it, we are allowing that to hold us back in that trade-off, right? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And of being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Not just the inconvenience, but like how many times, and I'll speak here, right, from this place as like I said, someone with a complex relationship to the land that I'm on, right? As half of my bloodline is very clearly settler, came here to settle these lands and to colonize, and the other half was here already. But how many times do we not, as outsiders to the Indigenous communities, speak on something or hold the folks around us accountable when they say things that are out of alignment, or right, because we don't want to be uncomfortable in that moment, right? Or how many times are we invited to places that we don't show up because we're afraid we're going to be uncomfortable in that moment, right? Got invited to feast by a coworker this week, and I showed up at his house and I was like, I'm here. And he was like, I'm not there. And I was like, cool. He texted me 30 minutes later. He was like, where are you? I was all, I'm with your mom, bro, and your grandbaby. We're chilling. Like, there's that moment where like, I don't know if I should go inside. I don't know nobody in there, but I was invited here. And so I'll show up and I'll be a good relative. And I brought apples and I made friends, right? But how many times do we have those opportunities and we're afraid of the inconvenience, or we're afraid of being uncomfortable, or we're afraid of in a room full. So what I say is if I am the lightest complected person in the room, that I speak the least. But if I know that I'm in a room full of people where some shit is not going to be said, if I'm not the one who says it, then I have the responsibility in that room to say it, right? There's some rooms that I'm assigned to listen, and there's some times that I'm assigned to speak. And right, there are on both ends of that moments that we can find discomfort. But if we choose to show up and to be a good relative, right? Like Ms. Kamada keeps saying, right? Be the good relative, right? If we choose in those moments and let that guide us, then that inconvenience and that uncomfortableness becomes a casualty of resistance, right? And not struggle, right? Resistance. Sometimes we are a beaver built dam to the river, and sometimes we're just a couple of rocks that got shown up there, right? Sometimes we are structurally resisting what is coming in that flow, and sometimes we are doing it by showing up and doing the thing that is inconveniencing or uncomfortable. But I think there's so much for white folks about like, oh, I'm scared to do that. Oh, I'm scared to say that because what will other white folks alongside of me think, or what will other people in the room think that are non-white? And that uncomfortableness, that's a casualty of resistance. That's a casualty of allyship if you're serious about what you're doing. And sometimes you're fucking uncomfortable. Sorry. And right. And folks remember that too, right? Folks in the room who can't say the things that you're saying or won't say the things that you're saying, they'll remember you stood up and you said that thing when nobody else was willing to do it. And it doesn't ever matter if the folks in that room say to you, you really did that. What really matters is when the folks in that room leave that room and they go to other folks in that community and they say, hey, you know what? I know that person because we were in that room. And when nobody said the thing, they said the thing. Right. And so if you're going to organize with that person, or that person, you want to invite that person somewhere, I would say do that, because when I saw that person in action, they acted like a good relative. They behaved themselves in a way that was respectful. Right. They did the things that were difficult to do, and they're not inconvenienced. Right. They're not slowed by the idea that some people might not like them. Some people might not like you for saying the difficult thing. Those are probably not your people anyway.
Oh my God, this is why we love SLA. Thank you for reminding us.
That's another t-shirt. They're probably not your people anyway.
I don't know how many times I'm like, why do I always have to be the guy? Why does it always have to be me? Because now I look like I'm the like agitator and I'm the blah, but it's like I'm saying the things that I'm hearing and I'm like, oh God, okay, here we go. And you take that and you carry that, right? So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Can I just add too, like the flip, just to complement what Nuskamata was just saying, the flip, if you're not doing it as an ally,
Oh, goodness.
Who keeps cutting off all the best parts?
I know, right? The wisdom we can infer.
it's if it's not allies doing the work or heavy lifting, some of the heavy lifting under our direction, guess who's doing the work? I said, it's the four of us. We're the ones doing it, right? That's the flip. Just to kind of expand and to complement what Nuskamata was saying. If you guys aren't doing it, if you're not helping with the heavy lifting, if you're not amplifying, if you're not helping to organize alongside somebody who is organizing it, who with a lived experience and who this is going to impact and affect, guess who does the work? It's all the brown people. All the brown and black people are doing the work already. We're doing all the heavy lifting right now, and that's not fair, and that's not okay. It's not right. It's not just. And this is what's been happening. So, just to kind of build off Nuskamata, and Nuskamata, you're never alone. We're here too. I mean, like, we could all, I said, you're never alone. We're here too. But I was being silly. I was saying it like if I was going to cry, but there's so many times I've called everyone here, all four of us, like I've called on the three of them to say, I'm having a hard time. This is happening. What do I do? And this is real time. Let's learn about what's going on, or let's unpack this, or I've prayed with everyone that's here, like I've been in everybody's home. Everyone here has invited me into their home and invited babes into their home, or they've been invited to the work that I've been doing. So like this is real sisterhood, real good relatives with each other, and we're doing the things. But yeah, the like I said, the flip of what that was earlier was, if you're not doing it, guess who the work gets left to? Us, all the time. And that's not okay.
Yes, I was just putting in the chat, asking if anybody had any questions as we draw to a close. Again, I feel we can continue talking. And I feel like for myself, I like some of the takeaways for me is I definitely having like a language shift, and even just like the word of allyship. I will probably start replacing that with being a good relative, because there's more integrated accountability, it feels like, with being a good relative, whereas with allyship and what it's kind of come to be known feels more like that you're doing a job rather than doing the work or being the person. And I wanted to just be very clear for everybody who is here and who will be watching this recording, that when we say, when Nusmata says, not to speak for you, to be a good relative, we're not just talking about Black and brown folks, right? We're talking about everybody. And that's what I mean, just to be clear, because I know there's going to be some white folks out there who are going to be like, oh, well, I'm not a relative, so you're not speaking to me. But no, we're talking to everybody, right? To step up and to move past that inconvenience, to move past viewing relationships as transactional, and rather to view them as relational in reciprocity, and to see what it to walk in that spirit of generosity, and where you are in your life. Maybe we all shift through different seasons in our life of being in different spaces and different environments, or using different skills, and what teachings have we acquired that we can to share with other, whether it's a traditional cultural teaching that that have been shared with us that we have permission to share, or even just like life skill teaching like Symbia was talking about. There's a lot of people who don't necessarily have the benefit of that, and we all have something that we can bring to weave a stronger community together. So with that, I would love to, I tried so hard to keep us on time. There's no keeping us on time. Time is a colonial construct anyway, so whatever. But are there any questions? People who showed up to be part of the talk today. And in the chat, we say no question. Oh, there is one response, no question, but deep appreciation for all your time and beautiful words, learning so much from all your wisdom and love. Oh, what are you sharing with us? All the books that you referenced?
Yes, books I referenced and books that I wanted to reference because there were other things that kept coming up, and I was like, oh, I'd like to talk about. My sister says this thing that when Esther reads a book, the community reads a book because I'm like, "Ah, I read a book on that, guys. I read a book. And the book said, because some folks like that stuff. And for me, my brain is just like collects information that way. But Cold Intimacies is a really good book about transactional relationships and capitalism and how we apply capitalist philosophies to our intimate relationships and what that looks like played out, that I thought was really fantastic. And then All About Love and the Will to Change by Bell Hooks. The Will to Change is specifically about patriarchy and how do we undo the patriarchy that lives inside of us. And I think when we talk about land back hand in hand with that is rematriation, right? And how do we reject these ways that have created and upheld the system, right, of white supremacy, of colonialism, of settler colonialism and patriarchy, right? And one of those is a rematriation. And so addressing the ways that we have internalized the patriarchy and how that plays out, I think is super important to that. And Pedagogy of the Oppressed is by Paulo Freire, and it's about love, bro. It's about the ways that structures exist in settler colonialist capitalist societies to perpetuate oppression inside of our own minds, right? How do you kill the cop in your own head? And how do we not overthink it and remember that at the foundation of being a good relative is love, right? And Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It goes hand in hand. There's also Bell Hooks and Paulo Freire actually wrote a book together that's really phenomenal if you want to get into that. But in the world of theory, those are some of the books that I think are really helpful if people are looking for things that they want to read in terms of how do I start to question what's in here and then unstructure that and then restructure that with something that's cool.
Thank you. We'll make sure that when we post the video that we will include all of the your book suggestions, Cecily. And then there was a question too about social media info. If you are on social media, can we follow you and continue to learn about all that you're doing and to be able to amplify to our networks as well? So we'll make sure that we add those when we get it posted as well. And final comments in the chat. There's a comment that says, same, I have so many thoughts, but have learned so much from this talk and will continue to reflect and heal myself to get over some of the lingering discomfort that I know is holding me back from being a good relative in more spaces. And one question, I have a question. I'm in a family therapy program where we get taught a lot about boundaries to avoid burnout, but this seems like a way to separate. I tend to say yes to the people in my life a lot and then I'm exhausted. What's a sustainable way to live in community? I'm still learning and don't think I understand that yet. Amazing question. Symbia, hand up right away. You want to answer?
Yes, 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 yes. There's a couple different things. The people that know me understand that I talk a lot in energy. You know, energy can't be created, can't be destroyed, can only be transformed or transmuted. When you're doing things, you're looking to also make sure that these things are sustaining you energetically. I was just sharing with Carrie and Nuskamana and Esley that I was at that pole raising yesterday. We were there until 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was still drumming until the last second before we left because that's filling up my cup. So there's kind of a balance there that it may be 3 o'clock in the morning, but I also know how to take care of myself the next day, right? I know how to also make sure I get rest and water. And so, yes, we're saying, just like Esley said, you don't always want to get up. You don't always, but you're like, no, I have a commitment to being in those spaces and upholding it. Because remember when I said, if we're not showing up, who does the work? It's the people who are left doing it. And the more hands doing the work, the more it makes it light. And that's what community is about, right? It's about shared work, shared responsibility. And so you're looking at that balance between, okay, if I have a calendar and these are some of the things that are coming up, you look at saying yes to the ones you know that you have capacity to show up for, that you know are going to also fill up your cup, and then being mindful of the days going into it and the days coming out of it about what you can do to care for yourself. I was teasing earlier. I was like, they're going to get a day later, just woke up and rolled out of bed after a potlatch. That's what they're getting today. My makeup is from yesterday and my hair is from yesterday. You know, but trying not to schedule things back to back. I should take my own advice, but you know, just making sure that there's breathing space in between some of these things too. And you start to learn what your body can handle what it can't handle. And I'm a true believer about disconnecting your energy from everybody. Last night when I came home, or this morning when I came home, I was just like, disconnect from everybody. You know, I send them all love, light, prayers, protection, but I'm going to disconnect from everybody, because when you're in that communal space like that, your energy just starts to connect. And it's like it has a living energy of its own when you're in community, and in big activities like that alongside lots of other people. And I find the way you get drained is by not disconnecting at the end of the night, or not cleansing or clearing your energy from being around. I tell people all the time, it's like brushing your teeth. If you've never brushed your teeth before and you brush your teeth and you're like, oh my God, my teeth feel so good, and then you don't brush your teeth again for like how long, and you're like, ugh. It's the same thing. If you're not clearing your energy, if you're not cleansing your space, you're not brushing your teeth. So understand exactly what Nuskamau said, closing that ceremony out, saying this, whatever that you've attended, okay, now it's complete. You know, I disconnect. I send you all love, light, and blessings. And I call my spirit back. I call my energy back. I call my power back. All of those things are super important, because energetically, you can stay connected to 100 people, and your energy's going out to them, and then you're at home with your kids and you're like, why do I feel so drained? Well, because your energy's still at the feast. Or it's also, I love that, Nusmata. It is badass to say no. And I got taught this by one of my teachers. He's saying, if it's not a fuck yes, it's not a yes, right? And like, those are the things that you're going to say yes to. And it makes that no sacred, because you're protecting the things that you're like, if you're, I also look at it from an anti-racism lens. What are you building with your energy, right? What are you connecting, or what are you dismantling? Are you contributing to capitalistic society on a regular, and that's all where your energy is going? Or is it into resistance? Is it into community building? Is it into amplifying? Like, look at where your energy is being directed and understand how precious that is, right? If I'm only in anti-racism spaces and I'm fighting white people to not be racist all the time, that's exhausting. There's nothing about that that is replenishing to me. And I have been in that space for a long time. And now I'm like, I prayed about it and I got this kind of insight, was like, where do you want to put your energy? Are you going to put, 90% of your time teaching white people not to be racist and 10% in community? Or are you going to go 90% in community and 10% in doing that anti-racism work, right? So it was just a wake-up call. Whatever percentage I'm going to choose is my own thing, but it was a wake-up call to me to be like, oh, you're right. That's where my energy is going. And that's what I'm committing to putting it into. And that's what I'm building and upholding, and not even realizing I'm building and upholding white supremacy culture by just contributing to it and giving my energy to it, right? Instead of like building in community and showing up and modeling that, being that good relative in community, and letting people see me do that.
I think too, there's a difference between being called into relationship and transactional experiences, right? And so when I think about this comment about like a family therapy program, right? Because like it's a world that I exist in also, right? And like, where are your boundaries at? And like, why are you pouring from a cup when you don't have nothing left to pour? And like that kind of language. So much of that is a result of relationships that are transactional and not reciprocal, right? And I think it's important in this world, right, to think about like my relationship with Symbia is not 50-50, right? Or it's not 100, right? Some days I've got 80 and Symbia has 45, right? Like, and some days Symbia's got 120, even though she's been up for 3 days at a fire, right? And I'm dragging in with 15, right? And it doesn't mean that we're always showing up with equal parts to give. It means that on the days when I have less, then she helps to carry, right? And on the days when she shows up with and she needs support in that way, then I show up in that way for her, right? So much like of burnout, right? Because I definitely do a job where people talk about that a lot. Is because folks are doing a job, right? They're not, this isn't the work, right? And so, yeah, if you're pouring what you've got into something and you're not engaged in community in a way where you see that return and you see the other side of that, then it is burnout, right? Then you do have to say no to stuff you don't want to do. I'm trying really hard to not curse, guys. Sorry. And so I think it's, and I think that it's important to know that when you start to show up in those ways and you hold people accountable the way that you hold yourself accountable in relationship, right? And in existing, and when you say to folks, this is who you told me you wanted to be, and the actions that you're carrying right now are not, that's not what you said. And if you want to be somebody else, that's fine. But this is who you told me you wanted to be, and so I'm just holding you accountable to who you told me you wanted to be. If you want to be somebody else, and just tell me, we'll change the rules, and then I won't hold you accountable to this anymore. The folks that don't want to be held accountable, they're gonna leave. And those folks that drain you because you're trying to pour into that and you're going, come on, let's go, bro. Come on, let's go. They're gonna go somewhere else because they don't want to be held accountable and they don't want to do the work. And the folks that want that, the folks that want to be good relatives, that want to show up, that want to be in community in that way, they will come back and those relationships will be reciprocal. And then it won't feel so much like, oh, I'm being drained. Oh, it's taking too much. Oh, I have to learn to say no to things I don't want to go to, because then in your mind, you'll be like, well, yes, I'm tired, but I know that if I go spend 45 minutes with Symbia, that's going to be 3 hours in the end, and it's going to feel good, right? In the end, it's going to feel like I got blessed, right? It's going to feel like something came back to me in that giving. A lot of our relationships don't feel like that because they're transactionally based on a capitalist structure. And this is a very difficult, challenging one. And I'm grateful for all the teachings that I have on this. Our families can feel like places that drain because of this structure and the way that it exists and the way that our elders have been trained up within this. Bell Hooks says that when things get challenging, we can either run from it or we can double down. And when we double down, that's when we know that that's what love is. A very challenging relationship with my parents because of the way that they were socialized and the experiences that they had. And I'm grateful for ceremony. And I'm grateful for elders who remind me all of the time. My godfather would say, you bullshit, that's your mom. Go love her anyway. Find a way to exist with her and find a boundary that you don't ever have to speak on in front of her, to find a way to navigate that relationship and to love and to be there in those moments because they don't last forever. I carried a lot of resentment. I spent years not speaking to my parents because of the things that we had went through. And the first time I sat with my godfather, he asked me, "You love your mom?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And I said, "Well, yeah," but he said, "Stop. Do you love her?" And I said, "Yes, by the name, I love her." He said, "Okay, then go do that. Don't make it so complicated, right?" And I know that it's hard, but I also think that there's lessons there about forgiveness, about returning, about what does it like to resist with love, right? What they want is for us to reject our folks and to other them and to space away from them and to create all of these boundaries, because not having each other is how this continues to work in our tiny homes with our 4.2 people and our 2.3 dogs and our taxes and all that other stuff, right? Loving folks is messy, and loving our elders who lived through a lot of stuff that we didn't have to live through because they lived through it is hard. But solidarity looks like loving folks even when we don't want to, right? And that looks like, maybe I don't like these motherfuckers today, but I still believe in their freedom and I still believe in their humanity, and I still get up and that is part of my resistance too. I never thought in a million years I'd be the person out here like, we should really just love your moms more, bro. But my godfather would be so proud. If you cut a clip of this, he would be thrilled to hear me talk like this about my mom, because it would make him so happy, because he would say, you've been listening to the lessons, you've been listening. That even the folks that are our first abusers, right, are our first oppressors, are our first harmers, right, because of the experience they had. What they always really needed was more love. They needed more love. And if we get the opportunity to see that and to be able to give that to them, then we should do that too.
Miss Mara, did you want to add anything before I jump in to share some thoughts? Um, I think, similar to what Esley was saying, looking at it kind of on the systems side of things, that there, I've been thinking about this a lot, about what I'm calling identity dysphoria, and how, because of these systems, there's a bit of a spectrum where we've potentially been conditioned to be either overgivers or overtakers, and different identity factors that we might hold might have had different messaging. And for someone who, myself, recovering people pleaser, I've had a lot of messaging to be an overgiver. And somewhere in the world, there is my energetically connected overtaker. And as I heal myself and shift, that person will be healing themselves and shifting to where I see us coming to more of that center, mutual liberation, reciprocity space. And for someone who is an overgiver, who has been conditioned and trained to allow yourself to be exploited, to be able to uphold these systems of patriarchy, white supremacy, all these kinds of things. Learning boundaries is really hard and really uncomfortable. And like Nusmana says, being a good relative to ourselves can feel like we're being really selfish. And it takes a lot of practice to get to that point of recognizing I have needs. I have needs that deserve to be met and to be honored, that I can do what I need to do to take care of myself and my nervous system, while also being able to balance being in relationship with others. So, where oftentimes we always take, like as a society, we take things and we pendulum swing, right? And I feel like we're now in that pendulum swing of finding ourselves in self care and boundaries to the point where we're cutting everybody off. And it now is like being weaponized to be able to uphold comfort, right? So I'm putting a boundary in place so I don't have to be uncomfortable. And that's not a boundary, because boundaries can be flexible, not permeable, but you can be flexible with your boundaries. I think Symbia was saying this too. We having a boundary, we get to choose. And it's coming out of that training that we must say yes to everything, right? That if someone wants something from us or they're saying that we need to be doing this, we need to say yes to everything. And then that does lead to burnout, but it's not mindful. We're not choosing where we're showing up. We're not choosing to follow our values. We are reacting. And so when we start putting boundaries into place and we are being mindful of what are my values? Where do I want to put my time? Where do I want to put my effort? What am I going to say yes to? It is going to come with no's, because we can't do all of the things and we can't be all of the things for all of the people. And that is okay, right? And that is being in community too. And once we start living those values, and like Esley said, holding people accountable how they want to, they will exit our lives if they're not going to be in alignment with where we're going. And then that opens up space. And so sometimes that is with parents too, right? There is the having a boundary with a parent, and then they have the choice to come along or to not. And when they choose to not, we can still love them, but how we do that may look different than how it was before, or how they maybe say it needs to be, because that relationship previously was them being exploitative of you, right? Like as Lee said, families are messy, and so there's not necessarily one answer, but that's my take on on boundaries. Sylvia, yeah.
What I'm going to say is just really quick to add is that boundaries aren't an electric fence either, right? Like, I think when people are first learning about boundaries, and what feels hard about them sometimes is that's what they think they are, is that they're walls. And that's not what it is. It's a permeable membrane. It's what are you permitting to come in, and what are you permitting to go out? And it's learning about tuning in and finding your voice, right? That's a big part of the work of this, is being able to say no in a good way, and then also sharing what your needs are. In this moment, my body is so tired. And then you just get to say, no, not this time around, but I'd be happy to come the next time. Please remember to, or like I would be open to the invitation another time. Finding your voice. So yeah, I just wanted to say that piece. Boundaries are not electric fences. I've met a couple electric fences when people are learning boundaries, and I was there too, right? Like, when I started to learn about boundaries, because we were not raised with boundaries, or ways to name our feelings, or ways to name our needs, right? Love my parents. Love them, love them. Like Esley said, love them. Understand now as a parent where they're coming from, because there's some things that are coming out of my children's mouths. So I'm like, huh, I remember saying that. I remember feeling that. And like I literally had that moment this morning. I was like upset about something. Yeah. And I was like, what's this lesson trying to teach me? And then I was like, where's the root of this? And I was like, that was me when I was a kid. Oh, this is like one of those hurts. Yeah. And my boundaries have been electro fences to people too, and I've had to find ways of saying, "Hey, I feel upset about this," or "Hey, can we talk about this?" or "Hey." So anyway, I just wanted to put that in there because community work is you're hoping and praying that being a good relative, you're going to stay a good relative. And doing that, you need to do your own work. Right? You can't put your emotional baggage on every single person that you're in community with, or project on them, or blame them, or scapegoat them. Being a good relative means doing your own work and loving on yourself and your yeses, your fuck yeses. I know I'm going to swear, but
Hey, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I feel like there is so much heart and wisdom and knowledge and teachings shared today. I really appreciate you gifting us your time and your thoughts. And I hope sometime in the future we can have part three because we got to like one question, 1.5 questions again. And I thank you very much. I should probably double check and make sure that there's not official things that I need to say to wrap up.
can I say one last thing before we go?
Yes,
When are we gonna get our podcast all together?
yes, yes.
I just had to tease. Sorry. I was like sitting here listening. I could listen to us all
Yeah.
day long. It was so interesting. I was like, I love how all of our teachings are complementary together. Like maybe that sounds prideful or conceited or whatever, but I'm like, I love my friends. I love listening, and I could listen. I'm like fangirling over my own friends. Oh my God, I love these ladies. I love all the gifts that we all have together, and that they come together. It's like powerhouse. I love it. I love it. I love it. Just had to say that.
I'll have to get myself a sweatshirt though, because I definitely feel like I have a little FOMO going on this whole time. But okay. Um, just thank you for being in community. Thank you for modeling for us what that means and for sharing. It was definitely, I feel very, very just grateful and blessed to be able to be sitting in this Zoom room with all of you. So thank you very much. Okay. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. And we will get the recording out to everybody soon and up on our YouTube quite quick. So